Hello and welcome to the Tomcast. I'm Tom, president and dictator for life of 515comics.com. It's the start of a new year, so what better to do than continue to look back? At the end of 2013, I did a Tomcast looking back at points that were hit in the comic, basically like what has happened in the story in the past year, what I was really excited about to show you, and just kind of what were some of my favorite things. Just do a little recap. So I'm just going to do that again, but for this year. First, let's talk numbers. I managed to put out 136 pages of the storyline of Nextus this year. That's not bad. It's not quite as good as the previous year, where I think I put out like 148 pages. That number does not include chapter covers. It does not include any fillers or anything like that, or any guest art. That's 136 comic storyline updates, which is still pretty good. And I did get married. I took some time off, so there were that's only like 3 or 4 of the posts. But still, it's a large chunk of the story, and I'm very happy that I was able to get through that much. We fully completed 4 chapters in the year of 2014. The very first page of 2014 was the first page of chapter 18. Then we went into chapters 19, 20, 21, and 2015 starts out with us just getting into the very beginnings of chapter 22. Just a quick reminder, if you don't read Nextus, or if you are not currently up to date, I'm going to be talking about all of the stuff that's been happening, so spoilers. This is just what I was excited about, and if you haven't read it already, it might ruin some stuff for you. I'm not really one of those guys, but I know some people are really like, oh, don't spoil stuff for me, I want to find it out on my own. Chapter 18 started out with a scene of Roy breaking into Tony's apartment and basically bothering him and being Roy. I really liked this scene. It was a good opportunity to show how these two characters react when their leader RJ is not around. Although Roy is still basically a jerk whether or not there's anybody important watching. Also kind of learned Roy's attitude towards RJ in previous chapters. But way back in chapter 10, RJ basically screwed things up by not shooting or incapacitating Katya when they were closing in on John Smith, and Roy didn't take it very well. He's pretty unhappy about it, and we learn that he's willing to go outside the chain of command if that's what it's going to take to actually bring Smith in. Then we learned that the Knicks team has information on Randall Lockheed and cohorts. Basically, they found out that the plane that they were chasing that ultimately shot them down in the desert a couple chapters ago is owned by Randall Lockheed. So they find out where he and his associates hang out and go looking for them. Tony actually ends this chapter going back to Dugan's place of work and talking to Mr. Yun, his boss. Which it was fun to draw Mr. Yun again. I was pretty excited about that. Chapter 19 opened with the group basically refitting themselves. You've got Elle and Dugan looking for a new plane. You've got 115 and Arik shopping for some new supplies. Also, we get to see 115 in his delightful robot disguise, which just makes me happy. I like it a lot. Back at the room behind the bar, we've got Randall and John interacting a little bit more. Now Randall's actually getting to take a look and talk with John a little bit, so that's kind of cool. Those characters getting to know each other a little bit more. Also, Katya wakes up. Randall and Katya talk about her connection to the Hooded Man, which in turn leads to all kinds of information about the Wei-Wucrai and the Ocean Shard that we just did not know before now. It was cool to kind of get to some of the lore and supposedly some of what is actually true about the Ocean Shard and the Wei-Wucrai. Chapter 19 ends with Katya finally admitting that the item that she was forced to steal from the Wei-Wucrai by the Hooded Man was the map that Randall has. Chapter 20 starts off with Tony going to Nick's headquarters and talking to his teacher, Master Dairo, who readers know is also a member of the Wei-Wucrai Council. Tony goes to ask about Katya, the woman with the red markings, because she's kind of causing problems, and it was weird that Dairo didn't know about her, didn't warn them that she was going to be there. Then we see that Randall is settling into his new ship learning the ins and outs of how that works. We also get to see the giant sword that Auric bought for 115. I did that in a Tomcast this last summer when those pages actually came out. About how excited I was for that sword. But I really like that sword. I'm excited for it to show up again in the comic. Then we end chapter 20 with Auric and Elle having a nice heart-to-heart conversation, accented by a nice little hug. It was so cute. Made me so happy to draw that. I don't get to draw cute stuff that often. Chapter 21 opens with a fantastic scene where Dugan decides it's time for 115 to have a human experience, and that human experience is get drunk. At the bar, they run into Stoltz. The appearance of 115's Silly Straw is what kind of pushes him over the edge to actually go ahead and take the plunge and try alcohol. We move on to see that the Knicks is trying to close in on Randall and company. They don't really know where they are, so they're just kind of canvassing an area that they could likely have stayed in. Then we end chapter 21 on a scene that I was very excited to draw, and that is this scene between Dyro and Ress, who is also a member of the Way We Cry Council from way back in chapter 13. We learned a lot about kind of how the Ways don't necessarily agree on things all the time, how even though they're a council that's supposedly setting out to pursue the ideals of all the Way We Cry and supposedly all people, there's still a lot of politics and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and people ultimately in the Ways are still kind of looking out just for themselves. And also in that scene we got to learn a little bit about the brands that Katja has, the markings that she has on her wrists and forehead, and that apparently those came from Ress, and they're bad news. That's my recap. Honestly, those were just some of my favorite pages to draw that I showed you guys while I was going through that. So, thanks again for reading my comic. Thanks again for watching the Tomcast. Hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you... The heater just came on. I will see you next week.